Chakotay's back, and we've got some Back to the Future style time travel antics, with heaps of references to past Star Trek. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Well, episode 3 of Star Trek Prodigy Season 2. Who saves the Saviors? The season is really, I think, getting off to a nice start at this point. We're 3 episodes in and the story is really starting to crank along. This season seems to be far more serialized than the last season, where last season we kind of had a lot more self-contained episodes. Our first 3 have been pretty much completely serialized, picking up where the last episode has left off in the story that we're telling here for Season 2 of Prodigy. Now, the title for this episode is kind of a little bit reminiscent of that Season 3 Next Generation episode, Who Watches the Watchers? Who Saves the Saviors? Kind of feels like it's calling back to that episode title. With the ship on autopilot, the kids are through the time portal, crash landing in Solem of the future, which because of that premature launch, it is before Chakotay sent the protostar off on remote pilot to go find its way out into the galaxy and ending up on Tars Lamora. The kids have arrived too early here. They're 4 hours before his launch, and they have to play it pretty cool because they don't want to mess up the timeline. Majel uses some fabric from her uniform to fashion a headband to cover her Vulcan ears, much the same way that Spock did in Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. I get the sentiment here, but considering Dal already looks significantly alien, and Spock did that in Star Trek 4 to blend in with humans, I'm not sure why Majel needs to do this on Solem amongst the Valnakot, which he clearly looks not even remotely like. Some Valnakot soldiers arrive, and it looks like the kids are taken into custody. Meanwhile, back on present-day Solem, where we get a precise star date of 61860.1, which puts us at the year 2385, which is the same year that we saw the flashbacks for in Star Trek Picard Season 1 of the Utopia Planitia shipyard's destruction. Essentia and the Council are trying to stir up more anti-Gwyn rhetoric, trying to convince them to her way of thinking and not wanting to listen to the other party, so to speak. Gwyn and her father, Itheron, come to speak to the council and try to convince them of some common sense. Despite the fact that Gwyn and Essentia both want to stop civil war on their homeworld, Essentia believes branching out into the galaxy and exploring the stars, meeting other races, including the Federation, is set for nothing but an outcome of civil war, whereas Gwyn believes that they should be able to venture out into the stars without the whole planet going into civil war. So Gwyn has to invoke this ancient Valnakot ritual called the Valuvra, which is basically a fight to the death. Each race seems to have a strangely named battle to the death, whether it be the Vulcans or the Klingons or in this case the Valnakot. The kids are captured and they're thrown into a cell with, of course, Chakotay and his first officer, Adric. I think this is the first time we've actually got the name of Chakotay's first officer from the protostar, and Adric is meant to be an Aurelian, one of the avian species of Star Trek. We haven't seen too many times, mostly in the animated series and also Lower Decks. And even though the kids are meant to stay to themselves, not disrupt the timeline, don't get involved, not interference, all of that temporal prime directive kind of stuff, they just can't help themselves. They just gotta get in there and get their nose in, and I think Zero kind of works out that, you know, maybe we were always meant to be here. Maybe we were here in the beginning and it was always us that helped Chakotay and Adric escape from Solem. So without too much convincing, Chakotay and Adric kind of team up with the kids to bust out of their prison cell, even though there, could be some time-changing ramifications or whatever, which Majel points out quite prominently with some past examples from Star Trek episodes, referencing the Bell riots from DS9's past tense, and also the Cochrane warp test from the Star Trek First Contact movie. Meanwhile, on present-day Solem, we've got Essentia and Gwyn partaking in this Vanura ritual, which is this big fight on this arena sort of stage. It lowers into this sort of chasm on the planet, and although they have to leave their heirloom weapons behind, apparently this pit that they're lowered into has got a lot of this programmable matter stuff floating through the air, and they're expected to I guess, use the Force to bind it together and create new weapons and shields and everything. So it's quite an engaging fight between these two. For a race that has no desire to leave the planet and just stay on their planet, not venturing out into space, not get involved with other races, they do have some quite fancy technology. It's sort of this sort of programmable matter that they use with this heirloom business and everything, where they can create weapons and shields and all this sort of thing. Seems to be quite advanced. This sort of technology is stuff we sort of didn't really see in Star Trek until kind of like the 30th century plus with Discovery and so forth. But these guys seem to have it at their disposal at this particular point in time, but they seem to only kind of use it for weaponry and so forth, to create, daggers, swords, shields, that sort of stuff for personal offense and defense weaponry sort of stuff. So they're sort of having this fight there, and they're kind of, I'm not quite sure. They haven't really ever explained it completely with the Voyager in terms of when they can make their faces glow. Are they kind of using some sort of telekinesis kind of thing, a bit like Jedis use the Force to stop things in midair and to create the swords and the shields and stuff out of the matter that is flying around and everything. I'd like a little bit more in-depth examples and descriptions in terms of how exactly this technology works, whether all Voyager have kind of like some sort of telekinetic abilities, or whether this is just with the heirloom business that they've got going on. That sort of feels like it needs a little bit more explanation. Meanwhile, we've got Jankum using a tricorder to remote control operate his mechanical hand, a bit like Thing from the Addams Family, trying to activate consoles and running away from some of those little scorpion droids that the Voyager have as part of their security forces. Jankum just can't help himself with his Tellarite personality, making bird puns every 5 seconds to poor old Adric, who is sort of a bit put out by him. But they managed to get out of the cell. His hand unlocks it and everything. We've even got Majel using the Vulcan nerve pinch to help their escape, which obviously comes out as very suspicious to Chakotay. How did you know this? Just these sort of random traders using these techniques. I think Chakotay's onto them. The battle between Essentia and Gwyn continues. We've got her using the programmable matter spears that Essentia throws at her to act as a staircase to get out of the giant pit that they're trapped in. Meanwhile, the kids are trying to create a bit of a diversion so that Adric and Chakotay can launch the Protostar, shooting at the dreadnoughts with running around on sort of speeder bikes, phasering them. And in the first iteration of their escape, Adric got shot and Chakotay had to remote launch the Protostar into the wormhole. But this time around, a phaser ends up in Chakotay's possession, which wasn't there earlier, which meant rather than just being able to launch the Protostar and then be captured right away, he was actually, and Adric were able to make it on board the ship, which they weren't able to do last time. So this is a pretty catastrophic change in the timeline, which then means that all of the events with the Protostar ending up on Tars Lamora never happened. Everything has been screwed up in the time stream, and we end up with Gwyn about to be climbing out of the pit as a victor of the battle with Essentia, but much like Marty McFly in Back to the Future, she starts to fade out of existence because she was only born because of her father's creating her in a kind of IVF sort of situation on Tars Lamora. So if they weren't there looking for the Protostar, then Gwyn would never have been born and so forth. So, we get this sort of phasing out of reality where she starts to vanish, and therefore her grip on the spears on the side of the temple wall falters, and she ends up falling to the bottom of the pit. Essentia makes it to the top. They shut the chamber behind her, locking poor old Gwyn in the bottom of this ritual pit, with Essentia coming out as the victor. This season is really cranking off to a really nice start. I think the fact that we're getting these nice serialized episodes, one after the other, kind of really is driving the story along, and how it's all linking back to stuff that we've seen in season 1 is playing out really nicely. And I love the fact that we've got a bit more involvement with Chakotay this season as well. I think it's nice that we're getting a lot of these legacy characters from Star Trek Voyager involved in the show with the EMH Doctor and with obviously Janeway and now we've had a big involvement with Chakotay in this episode. I think it's great. It's coming along really nicely. And I think this time travel element of the season, playing out a little bit Back to the Future style, is working really well. But what do you guys think? Leave a thought in the comments section and let me know what you thought of episode 3 of Star Trek Prodigy Season 2, Who Saves the Saviors? Guys, if you haven't subscribed to Sci-Finatics yet, please be sure to do so. Click on that big subscribe button to stay current and up to date with all the latest Star Trek news on YouTube. And be sure to check out my merch in the merch store. Plenty of cool t-shirts and hoodies and mugs and caps and everything there. Really helps the channel out because revenue from views alone is not very much. So all your support is really appreciated there, and pick yourself up a cool Star Trek t-shirt or something there, and it helps support the channel as well. I'll be back very soon with my review for episode 4 of Star Trek Prodigy Season 2. I'll see you guys then.